I'm Lena Carter, 33 years old, a brand designer living in Seattle. If you saw me now, a bright apartment on the 20th floor, a stable career, a confident smile, you'd probably think I was born into happiness. But what no one knows is that for the first 30 years of my life, I was the forgotten child in my own family. Since I was little, I've known what it feels like to be compared. My brother Ethan was praised as the genius, the pride of our parents, and me the one quietly mopping floors in their family restaurant every night. I was only mentioned when someone needed help. But that wasn't the end of it. One fateful night at my father's birthday party, I finally realized my true worth and began the journey to walk away and return everything they had ever done to me. For most of my 20s, my life revolved around Carter's Grill, the small family restaurant my parents opened when I was in high school. It was supposed to be a dream, our legacy, as Dad liked to say. But in reality, it was a never-ending cycle of stress, debt, and blame. When the restaurant started losing money, I had just graduated from college with a degree in design. I wanted to move to Portland, start my career, and finally live my own life. But Mom called me one night, her voice trembling, saying, "Lena, your father's been so worried. The restaurant's barely surviving. We need you, sweetheart." Those words, "we need you," pierced through me like a command. I packed up my things, canceled my apartment deposit, and drove back home the next morning. For the next 5 years, I worked at Carter's Grill almost every day. I redesigned the menu, built their social media pages, took photos, created a new logo, everything I had learned from school. I poured into that place. When the bills piled up, I sent money from my savings. When Dad couldn't handle the paperwork, I stayed up till 3 a.m., balancing the books. I thought they would finally see me not as the second best child, not as Ethan's shadow, but as their daughter who kept them afloat. But that moment never came. Every time the restaurant made a small profit, Dad would say, "Ethan's advice really helped us." Ethan's advice. The same Ethan who lived 3 hours away, working as a sales manager, and only visited when there was a family photo to take. I remember one night in particular. It was raining hard, and I had stayed late cleaning up after a rush of customers. Dad was sitting at a table, sipping coffee. I asked quietly, "Dad, do you ever feel proud of me? For helping out here?" He looked at me, half smiling. "Of course, sweetheart. But you're just doing what family does. Ethan's the one really making us proud. He's got that big job. He's successful. You'll find your way too someday." That word again, someday. Someday, when I'm like Ethan. Someday, when I stop being me. I swallowed my disappointment, told myself that maybe love just looked different in our family. But deep down, I knew. Love was conditional in the Carter's house. It depended on how shiny your achievements were, or how well you fit their version of success. When the pandemic hit, Carter's Grill nearly collapsed. We were drowning in bills, no customers, no savings. My parents panicked. Ethan sent a text saying, "Wish I could help, but things are tight right now." I didn't hesitate. I transferred $8,000 from my own emergency fund to cover payroll and rent. I didn't even tell my boyfriend at the time, Daniel, because I was embarrassed. "You're too kind for people who don't see you," he said when he found out later. I laughed it off, but a part of me broke that day. Months passed. I started taking on freelance work to rebuild my savings, but every time I managed to save a little, something at the restaurant would break: the refrigerator, the oven, the air conditioner, and my parents would call again. "Lena, just one more time, okay? We'll pay you back when business improves." They never did. By year 3, I had sent them over $25,000. And every time relatives came over for dinner, they would talk about how Ethan's business advice saved the restaurant. I would sit there smiling, pretending not to hear, pretending it didn't burn inside me. It wasn't until one weekend that everything truly hit me. I was sitting on the back porch after a long day at the restaurant. Mom came out holding her phone, showing me photos of Ethan's new apartment, a sleek downtown loft with floor-to-ceiling windows. "Isn't it amazing?" she said, beaming. "He's doing so well for himself. We're so proud." Quote. She didn't even notice that my hands were still covered in grease from cleaning the fryer. That was the moment I realized no matter what I did, it would never be enough. Not until I was like Ethan, not until I became someone I didn't even want to be. So, I started planning my escape. Quietly. Secretly. I began saving money again, this time without telling them. I took on more freelance clients, working late into the night. I applied for jobs outside the city. I told myself, this time, I'm building something for me, not for them. Still, even as I planned to leave, I couldn't stop helping. It was a toxic cycle, guilt and duty, wrapped in love. Then one evening, Ethan called me out of nowhere. Hey, heard the restaurant's still standing, he said with that smug laugh. Guess all my advice worked, huh? I froze. My chest tightened. For a second, I thought about correcting him. I thought about saying, it wasn't your advice. It was my blood, sweat, and tears. But he didn't. Instead, I just said, yeah, guess it did. Because I already knew my revenge wouldn't come from words. It would come from walking away and letting the truth reveal itself when I was gone. My father's 60th birthday was supposed to be a celebration, a night of laughter, music, and family. At least that's how my mother described it when she called a month earlier. Lena, make sure you can come home that weekend, she said. Your brother's flying in from Chicago. We'll all be together again. It'll mean a lot to your dad. I hesitated. Things between us had grown tense. I hadn't visited home in months, partly because I was tired. Tired of pretending everything was fine. Tired of being invisible. But there was a flicker of hope in me. The same foolish hope I'd carried all my life. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd finally see me. So, I said yes. The night of the party, the restaurant was decorated with gold balloons and old photos of Dad smiling beside customers. There was a live band, a buffet, and at least 50 guests, family friends, old employees, even Ethan's college buddies. When I walked in, I felt like an outsider at my own family's event. Lena, you made it, Mom exclaimed, kissing me on the cheek. Her perfume was overwhelming. Your brother's been helping with the setup all day. Of course, he had. Ethan was standing near the stage, in his tailored gray suit, charming everyone around him. He looked like the golden boy he'd always been, confident, magnetic, everything I wasn't. He spotted me and smirked. Hey, little sis. Didn't think you'd show up. You usually avoid these things. Yeah, well, someone has to make sure the family looks complete, I replied. He laughed like I was joking. I wasn't. Dinner went on, full of small talk and fake smiles. My parents barely sat down, too busy entertaining guests. I helped serve drinks and clear plates, falling into the same pattern I always did, the quiet helper in the background. At one point, I overheard my aunt whispering to another relative, Ethan's doing so well. He really carries this family. My chest tightened. I looked down at my hands, remembering every late night I'd spent fixing that restaurant, every dollar I'd sent. Still, I stayed quiet. After dessert, Mom tapped her glass with a spoon. Everyone, can I have your attention? Let's toast to my husband, 60 years young, the hardest working man we know. Everyone cheered. I clapped too, even smiled. Then Dad stood up, holding his glass of whiskey, his face glowing red from pride and alcohol. Thank you, sweetheart, he said to Mom. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. I couldn't have made it this far without my family. People murmured in agreement. My eyes welled slightly. Maybe he'd finally say something kind. Maybe this was the moment. He looked at Ethan. And of course, to my son Ethan, the best thing that ever happened to this family. You've always made us proud, son. We're lucky to have you. The room applauded. Ethan grinned, raising his glass. Then Dad turned to me. For a brief moment, I thought I saw softness in his eyes. My heart stopped. And, well, Lena, he said, chuckling, thanks for being here tonight. You've always been helpful around the place. Every family needs someone like you to keep things running. Helpful. That was it. No pride, no acknowledgement, just helpful. People laughed politely, not realizing that my chest was burning. My throat tightened as I forced a smile. But then Dad added, almost as a joke, though it sliced through me like a blade. Sometimes I think if Ethan had been our only child, life would have been a lot easier. Right, hon? He laughed. Mom smiled weakly. Ethan smirked. The room went silent for half a second, but no one said anything. They all thought it was funny. I stood there frozen, my wine glass trembling in my hand. The sound of laughter faded into a dull roar in my head. That was the moment something inside me snapped. All those years of sacrifice, all those nights of exhaustion, every penny I'd given it suddenly felt meaningless. I set my glass down carefully on the table. "Excuse me," I whispered. And I walked out. No scene, no tears, no shouting, just silence. Because sometimes silence is louder than rage. Outside, the air was cool. I leaned against my car, shaking. I could still hear faint laughter from inside the restaurant. They didn't even notice I'd left. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, my reflection blurry in the windshield. I wasn't sure if I wanted to cry or scream. Then my phone buzzed a text from Mom. "Where did you go? Don't be dramatic, Lena. Your father was just joking." I stared at the message until my vision blurred. Then I deleted it. That night, I drove back to my apartment in Seattle, the city lights reflecting on my windshield like tiny shards of truth. I replayed his words over and over. If Ethan had been our only child, I thought about all the ways I'd bent myself trying to earn their love, all the times I'd believed that if I just worked harder, they'd finally see me. But the truth was clear now they never would. So I made a decision right there, on that dark highway. I would stop trying to be the daughter they wanted. I would stop saving people who didn't even want me around. And this time, I wouldn't just walk away. I'd make sure they felt what it's like to lose the only person who ever truly cared. The morning after my father's birthday party, I woke up feeling like I had swallowed glass. My throat was raw, my head heavy, and my eyes puffy from a night without sleep. The city outside my window looked perfectly normal: coffee shops opening, buses humming, people rushing to work, but inside me, everything had shifted. For the first time in my life, I felt nothing toward my family. Not anger, not sadness, just a deep, echoing emptiness. I opened my phone to a string of unread messages. "Mom, you really embarrassed us last night. Your father was just joking, Lena." "Dad, you could have at least said goodbye." "Ethan, lol, guess you finally proved Dad right." That one made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. The golden boy, forever untouchable. I tossed my phone aside and made myself coffee, the bitter, black kind that didn't need milk or sugar. I drank it in silence, staring at the steam curling above the mug. Something inside me whispered, "Enough, enough waiting, enough giving, enough pretending." I opened my notes app and started typing a message, not to anyone in particular, just to see the words take shape. But the longer I typed, the more I realized it wasn't just a vent. It was the goodbye. Group chat. Carter family. I've spent years trying to make this family proud. I gave up my savings, my time, my peace, all for a restaurant you said was built on love. But love shouldn't hurt this much. I'm done being the backup plan. I'm done being the helper, the disappointment, the invisible one. Starting today, I will no longer send money, manage the books, or answer calls about the restaurant. You have Ethan, the pride of the family, let him handle it. I wish you the best, but I'm done, trying to belong to a place that never wanted me. I stared at the words for a long time. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from release. Then, with a steady breath, I hit send. The reaction came fast. Within seconds, my phone lit up with calls and messages. "Mom, what do you mean you're done?" "Dad, this is childish, Lena. Don't ruin the family over one bad night." "Ethan, wow, guess you're having one of your dramatic episodes again." I didn't answer. Instead, I turned my phone face down and sat in silence. For the first time in years, there was no guilt, no pressure to fix everything, just quiet. And that quiet felt like freedom. By noon, Mom showed up at my apartment. She knocked for several minutes, alternating between gentle pleading and sharp demands. "Lena, open this door right now. We need to talk about this like adults." I sat on the couch, unmoving. "You can't just walk away from family," she shouted through the door. "You're being ridiculous. What will people think?" That last sentence made me laugh quietly. That was all it ever came down to, what people would think. When she realized I wasn't opening the door, she slipped an envelope under it. Inside was a photo of us when I was 8, me holding a tray of cupcakes at the restaurant's opening. On the back, she'd written, "You used to love helping us. What happened to that sweet girl?" I folded the photo carefully and put it away, because that sweet girl was gone, buried under years of exhaustion and unspoken hurt. The next few days were chaos. Ethan called, angry this time. You really think you can just quit? You think mom and dad can handle everything without you? He didn't respond. He called again, voice sharper. You're so ungrateful, Lena. After everything they've done for you. I hung up before he could finish. It was strange, the more they pushed, the calmer I became. I started sleeping through the night again. I cooked dinner for myself, read books, took long walks by the lake. It was as if I had been holding my breath for years, and now I was finally breathing. A week later, I got an email from my father. Short, typed in all caps. Subject: your decision. If you want to walk away, that's your choice. But don't expect us to be here when you regret it. I smiled at the screen. They still didn't understand. I didn't regret anything. For the first time, I was choosing me. A few days after that, a former coworker from the restaurant called. Hey Lena, just so you know, your dad's been saying you abandoned them. Says Ethan's the only one trying to save the business now. I thanked her for letting me know, but I didn't bother defending myself. Let them say whatever they wanted. I wasn't going to fight for truth anymore. I was going to live it. That night, I poured a glass of wine, stood on my balcony, and watched the lights of Seattle shimmer below. Somewhere between the city hum and the soft night breeze, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. It didn't come from forgiveness, or revenge, or closure. It came from walking away. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do to people who broke you is to show them how beautifully you can rise without them. For a few weeks, things were quiet, too quiet. After sending that final message to my family, I had expected anger, guilt trips, maybe even threats. But instead, there was silence, the kind that felt rehearsed, heavy, and waiting for its next move. I went on with my life. I threw myself into work, landed a new freelance contract with a big firm, and even started going to yoga classes again. Every morning I made coffee and didn't have to check my phone for restaurant emergencies. It felt new, free, but peace in my family never lasted long. It started with a phone call from a former coworker at the restaurant, Anna. Lena, she said hesitantly, have you seen Facebook? No. Why? You should probably check Ethan's post. My stomach tightened. I opened the app, and there it was, Ethan's latest post, already climbing past 1,000 likes and comments. Ethan Carter, public post. Family can be complicated. Some people pretend to help, but disappear when things get hard. I've learned that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. Some of us work hard while others just want credit. Proud to still be standing by my parents' side while others walk away when it matters most. The comments flooded in. You're such a good son. Not everyone has your sense of duty. Ignore the jealous ones, Ethan. And the worst part, my parents both liked the post. I felt something twist deep in my gut. My vision blurred for a second as I read line after line of strangers, praising him for being strong, staying loyal, holding the family together. I wanted to scream, to write a long, angry comment telling everyone what really happened, the money I sent, the nights I worked until sunrise, the times I cried in the back office while they slept. But he didn't. I closed the app and set my phone down because I knew if I responded, I'd only be feeding their story, the one where I was emotional, dramatic, ungrateful. No, I wasn't going to play that role anymore. The next morning, I went for a run around Green Lake. The sky gray and heavy with drizzle. My breath came out in small clouds, my heartbeat steady and real. As I jogged, I replayed the post in my mind, each word, each subtle jab. Some people pretend to help. Blood doesn't always mean loyalty. He wasn't just attacking me. He was rewriting history. But what Ethan didn't realize was that the truth has a strange way of surfacing, not through confrontation, but through contrast. Because while he was busy performing loyalty online, I was out there actually living. Over the next few weeks, I focused on my career. I landed a partnership with a boutique agency downtown, started working with creative startups, and slowly built a name for myself in Seattle's design scene. My work was featured in a local magazine. One day, I got an email from the editor asking if I'd like to do an interview. They wanted to feature local women who turned setbacks into success stories. I almost said no, I didn't want attention, but something inside me whispered, Why not? So I agreed. The article came out 2 weeks later, titled, "The Designer Who Walked Away from Family Business to Build Her Own Empire." It wasn't about revenge or bitterness. I didn't name anyone. I just talked about resilience, about learning to value yourself when others don't. The piece went viral locally. Clients reached out, opportunities opened, and for the first time, people were recognizing me not as someone's daughter, not as someone's helper, but as Lena Carter. And I knew my family saw it. How? Because the next day, Mom texted me for the first time in weeks. "I saw your interview. Couldn't you at least mention the restaurant? After all, that's where you learned responsibility." I almost laughed out loud. Even now, she couldn't celebrate me without claiming credit. I typed a reply, then deleted it. I wasn't going to explain myself anymore. A few days later, another storm brewed online. Apparently, Ethan had posted a follow-up. Some people love pretending they're victims in their success stories, but those who know the truth know better. This time, I didn't even flinch. Because now, I understood something powerful. Silence can be the loudest form of revenge. Let them talk. Let them spin stories. Every word they said only made them look smaller, and me, freer. Weeks passed, and I started to notice the cracks forming. The restaurant's Facebook page began receiving complaints, photos of burnt food, late orders, rude service. The same loyal customers who once adored my family started to drift away. Apparently, without my marketing and bookkeeping, things were falling apart fast. Ethan posted less and less. Mom stopped tagging him in photos. The cheerful family facade began to crumble. And I was too busy living to notice. One night, as I was leaving the office, I ran into Anna again. "You won't believe this," she said, lowering her voice. "Your dad had to sell one of the restaurant's delivery vans. They're struggling." I nodded quietly. "I'm not surprised. They keep saying it's because the economy's bad." "Sure," I said, smiling faintly. "Let them believe that." Yen. Because the truth was simple. They had built their world on the back of the person they ignored the most. And when that person walked away, the whole thing started to fall apart. That night, I opened my journal and wrote one sentence before bed. You don't always have to destroy people. Sometimes, all you have to do is leave. And as I closed the notebook, I realized that was the beginning of my real revenge. Not with anger, not with words, but with peace. It was a gray Sunday morning in late March when I received the letter. A real letter, handwritten, postmarked, sealed in a pale blue envelope. Nobody sent letters anymore, which made me instantly suspicious. The return address stopped me cold. E. Carter, Maplewood Senior Residence, Bellevue. Grandma Evelyn. I hadn't seen her in nearly 2 years. She was my father's mother, sharp-tongued but warm-hearted, the only one in my family who ever looked at me and saw a person, not a disappointment. I tore the envelope open with trembling hands. "My dearest Lena, I heard from someone at church that you've been doing well. Your name was in the paper. I knew you'd make something of yourself once you stopped carrying everyone else's weight. I'm writing because I'm sick, darling. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of tiredness that doesn't go away. I'd like to see you if you have time. There are some things I need to tell you about your father, about me, and about the restaurant. Love always, Grandma Evelyn." I read the letter twice, maybe 3 times. My throat tightened, and for the first time in months, I felt that old ache, the one that reminded me that despite everything, I still loved parts of that family. That afternoon, I drove out to Bellevue. The sky hung low with clouds, and the air smelled like rain and cedar. Maplewood was a modest place, surrounded by pine trees, and a small garden filled with spring tulips. When I walked into her room, Grandma was sitting by the window, knitting a scarf the color of sea glass. She looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes, sharp and full of mischief, lit up when she saw me. "Lena," she said, her voice cracking but bright. "I was afraid you wouldn't come." "Ew. Of course I came," I said softly, taking her hand. We talked for hours about my work, my apartment, the things I'd built for myself. She listened with quiet pride, occasionally nodding as if she'd known all along that I'd end up here. But eventually, her smile faded. "You know, your father wasn't always this way," she began. "When he was young, he adored you. But after Ethan was born, something in him changed. He started chasing respect, not love." I frowned. He never respected me. And because you reminded him of himself before he hardened, she said quietly. He saw your softness, your creativity, and it scared him, so he pushed it away. Her words hit me like a quiet truth I'd been avoiding all my life. She handed me an old leather notebook, edges worn and pages yellowed. This was your grandfather's, she said. When he died, your father wanted to sell everything, but I kept this. It has the restaurant's first recipes, but also something more: the loan documents. You'll see your name in them. I flipped through the pages and froze. There, under a date from 4 years ago, was my signature. It was the co-signer line on a refinancing agreement one I didn't remember signing. They used my name, I whispered. Grandma nodded sadly. Your father forged it. He thought you'd never notice. A cold rush spread through my chest. I wasn't just the forgotten daughter. I was their financial safety net even after I'd left. I wanted you to know, Grandma said, squeezing my hand, because you deserve to protect yourself. You've given enough. I swallowed hard. What should I do with this? Whatever gives you peace, she said. Revenge isn't about destroying others, Lena. It's about reclaiming what they took from you: your dignity, your power, your story. We talked until the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and lavender. When I hugged her goodbye, she whispered something against my shoulder that I'll never forget. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply being everything they said you couldn't be. As I drove back to Seattle, I kept one hand on the notebook in the passenger seat. The road stretched ahead, wet with rain and promise. For the first time, my revenge no longer felt like anger, it felt like clarity. They had taken my name. They had built their empire on my silence. But now, I had proof and a choice. And this time I wouldn't stay quiet. The rain was steady the day I decided to go back. Not for reconciliation, not for closure, but for truth. I walked into the old restaurant that evening, the smell of oil and soy sauce hitting me like a wave of memories: late nights, burned fingertips, laughter that never included me. The neon sign flickered weakly above the entrance. Carter's Kitchen, since 1987. Quote. Inside, everything looked smaller than I remembered. The place was almost empty. Ethan was behind the counter, his expression stiff when he saw me. Lena? Wow. Didn't expect you here. I didn't expect you to still be open, I said calmly. He forced a laugh. Slow week. People just don't eat out like they used to. I said nothing. I just looked around: the cracked tiles, the half-broken menu board, the tired faces of the two waitresses still loyal to this sinking ship. Then my parents came out from the back. Mom's eyes widened. Dad's face hardened like stone. What are you doing here? He demanded. I placed the leather notebook, Grandma Evelyn's notebook, on the counter. I think you already know. They exchanged quick glances. Mom looked nervous. Dad didn't. You shouldn't go digging into old paperwork, he said slowly. That was years ago. You forged my signature, Dad. Silence. Even Ethan froze. You used my name to secure a loan for this restaurant after I left. Dad exhaled sharply. We were desperate. I knew you wouldn't help, so I made it easier for everyone. Easier for you, I said coldly. You used me. Again. Mom reached out, her voice trembling. Lena, please. We didn't mean harm. You never mean harm, I interrupted. But somehow it always happens. Ethan stepped forward then, his jaw clenched. You don't have to make this dramatic. You're successful now. Why ruin us? I'm not ruining anything, I said, looking him straight in the eye. You already did that yourselves. I'm just taking back my name. I pulled out a small envelope, a copy of the notarized complaint I had filed that morning. It wasn't about suing them. It was about clearing my record legally. This isn't revenge, I continued. It's protection. The bank knows the signature was forged. They'll investigate. You'll have to deal with that. Dad's face went pale. Mom started to cry quietly. Ethan turned away, muttering something I couldn't hear. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Then I said softly, Grandma wanted me to tell you she forgave you, but she also said something else: that revenge isn't about hurting others. It's about reclaiming yourself. I finally understand that. Dad looked up sharply. You talked to her? Yes. Before she passed. Their faces fell: shock, guilt, and something close to grief. She's gone, Mom whispered. I nodded. She asked me to give you this. I handed them a folded piece of paper, her final note. I didn't stay to see them read it. Outside, the rain had eased into a drizzle. I stood on the sidewalk for a long time, staring at the flickering restaurant sign one last time. That place had been my prison, once a symbol of everything I wasn't allowed to be. But now, it was just a building, a fading memory. I turned away and walked toward my car. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I just felt free. As the city lights blurred through the rain, I whispered to myself, you don't always need them to say sorry. You just need to stop waiting for it. And that's when I realized my revenge had already been completed. Not through confrontation, not through destruction, but through peace, success, and walking away for good.